That was Emma, on a damp Tuesday afternoon in late October. October 22nd, to be exact. The kind of day where the light never quite commits. Just a flat, gray wash over everything. Rain slicked the sidewalks of her small, quiet town, turning fallen leaves into slippery mosaics of crimson and gold. Inside her little apartment, the air felt heavy, stale, like the dust motes dancing in the weak light from the window were the only things moving. She sat on the edge of her worn sofa, staring at a blank television screen. Her reflection looked back, hollow-eyed. Exhausted. It had been 11 months. 11 months since the phone call that shattered everything. Since her vibrant, laughing mother was gone, leaving behind only this crushing silence and a cavernous loneliness Emma couldn't seem to fill. She tried. God, she tried. Too much work. Empty conversations. Long walks that ended nowhere. But the grief, it clung like the damp chill seeping through the old window frames. It lived in the untouched teacup on the shelf, her mother's favorite. In the quiet that echoed after turning off the radio. She felt adrift, a tiny boat lost in a vast, gray sea. Unseen. Unheard. It wasn't a conscious decision, going to the shelter that day. More like her feet carried her there. A desperate, quiet plea for something. Connection? Distraction? Proof that life still pulsed somewhere? The Willow Creek Animal Rescue smelled of antiseptic, wet fur, and faintly, of hope. Dogs barked a frantic chorus from the back. Cats watched, worried, from behind cage bars. Emma moved slowly down the row, her heart a dull ache in her chest. She didn't know what she was looking for. Just not emptiness. Then she saw him. In the last cage on the bottom row. A cat not hiding, but not demanding attention either. Just sitting. A compact bundle of muted orange and white fur. He wasn't conventionally beautiful. Far from it. His most striking feature, impossible to miss, was his nose. It was big, prominent, a distinct, almost Roman curve that dominated his otherwise delicate face. But it wasn't just the size. The skin around it, and across the bridge, was raw-looking. Scaly. Patches of fur were missing, revealing inflamed skin beneath. A fungal infection, the shelter volunteer murmured apologetically, handing Emma a leaflet about ringworm. Barney Bubble, the sign read, needs meds 2x daily. Gentle soul. Emma knelt. The cold concrete bit through her jeans. Barney Bubble didn't meow. Didn't rub against the bars. Simply looked at her. His eyes, a startling, deep amber, held hers. Not pleading. Not fearful. Just seeing her. Truly seeing her. There was a profound stillness in him. A quiet dignity, despite the raw patches on his face, the slightly ragged fur, the indignity of the cage. He blinked. Slow. Deliberate. A cat kiss offered across the space. And in that moment, in the gaze of this battered, big-nosed cat, Emma felt something shift. A tiny, almost imperceptible crack in the ice around her heart. It wasn't joy. Not yet. It was recognition. A shared quiet. A mutual understanding of being a little broken. A little lost. She didn't reach in. She just stayed there, kneeling, lost in those amber pools. The frantic barking faded. The smell of antiseptic receded. There was just this cat, with his too big nose, his raw skin, and his impossibly deep, calm eyes, seeing the hollowness inside her and not looking away. This quiet moment, in a shelter smelling of disinfectant and longing, was the fragile, unassuming beginning. the start of something neither of them could have imagined. Because this cat, this Barney Bubble, wasn't just about to change Emma's gray, grieving world. He was about to touch millions. His battle-scarred face, that uniquely noble nose, would become a beacon, a story whispered across screens worldwide, a testament to quiet resilience, blooming unexpectedly from the most tender, wounded places. His journey, and Emma's, was just a slow, uncertain blink away. Bringing Barney Bubble home felt less like an adoption and more like bringing home a fragile secret. A secret wrapped in orange and white fur, with a nose like a small, weathered mountain. Emma's small apartment, usually echoing with absence, now held a new kind of quiet. The quiet of watchfulness. She'd set him up in the spare bathroom, a temporary sanctuary per the shelter's strict ringworm protocol. The soft bed, food and water bowls, a litter box tucked discreetly in the corner, and on the counter, the small arsenal of his recovery, antifungal ointment in a stark white tube, medicated shampoo, latex gloves. It felt clinical, cold, a far cry from the warm companionship she'd vaguely imagined. Barney didn't explore. He didn't meow at the door. He simply retreated, curled himself into the farthest corner of the plush bed Emma had bought, a miniature fortress against the unfamiliar smells, the sterile tiles, the giant, uncertain human who loomed twice a day with ointment and gloves. His amber eyes, so piercing in the shelter, were wide, unblinking pools of apprehension. He tracked her every move from that corner, a silent, sentient statue. The first time she approached with the ointment, gloved hands feeling clumsy and alien, he didn't hiss. He didn't scratch. He just shrank, flattened himself against the bed, his big nose twitching, a low, almost inaudible rumble vibrating deep in his chest. Not aggression. Pure, distilled fear. Emma's heart clenched. It mirrored her own fear, the fear of touching something broken, of getting it wrong, of causing more pain. "Okay, big guy," she whispered, her voice sounding too loud in the tiled room. Just gonna be quick. Promise." Her hands trembled slightly as she dabbed the cool ointment onto the raw patches bridging his nose and forehead. He flinched a tiny, involuntary jerk, but held terrifyingly still. His breathing was shallow, rapid. She could feel the frantic beat of his small heart beneath her fingers, a trapped bird against her palm. "Good boy," she murmured, the words tasting strange. Hollow. Was she comforting him, or herself? The process felt like a violation, an intrusion into his fragile peace. When she finished, withdrawing her hands, he stayed frozen for a long moment, before slowly uncurling just enough to bury his face deep into the bed's fleece, hiding that vulnerable nose. The message was clear: leave me alone. The routine became their uneasy dance. Twice a day, Emma would enter the bathroom, a ritual performed in near silence. She took softly about nothing in particular. The dreary weather outside, the price of milk, the plot of a book she couldn't focus on, meaningless chatter to fill the heavy quiet, to maybe soothe them both. She learned his subtle language. The slight flattening of his ears meant deep discomfort. The slow, deliberate blink, rare but breathtaking when it happened, was a flicker of trust. Mostly he just watched her, with those deep amber eyes that seemed to hold centuries of feline patience, and a profound wariness. She'd find herself sitting on the floor, just outside the bathroom door, after the ointment application, reading aloud, her voice a low hum. Sometimes, she'd catch him peering around the doorframe, just the tip of that noble nose and one watchful eye visible. He'd vanish if she looked directly at him. One evening, a week exhaustion hit Emma like a physical wave. The weight of her grief, usually a dull, constant ache, suddenly sharpened. It was the small things. Finding her mother's handwritten grocery list tucked in a cookbook. The way the late afternoon light hit the empty armchair. A wave of loneliness, so vast and cold, it stole her breath. She sank onto the floor outside Barney's sanctuary, her back against the cool wall, head in her hands. The tears came then, silent and hot, a release she usually fought. She didn't sob, just let them fall, feeling utterly, profoundly alone. The apartment was utterly quiet. Just the sound of her own shaky breaths and the soft drip, drip of the kitchen tap she'd been meaning to fix. Then a sound, so almost tentative, a tiny scratch against the other side of the bathroom door. Emma froze, holding her breath. Silence. Then another scritch, followed by the faintest, most hesitant emerty? A question. A sound she hadn't heard him make before. Wiping her eyes roughly, she leaned closer to the door. "Barney," she whispered, her voice thick. Another pause. Then a soft thud, as if he'd sat down heavily just on the other side. Pressed against the wood. She could almost feel the warmth radiating through it. She didn't open the door. Didn't speak. She just slowly leaned her own shoulder against the door, mirroring him. Sitting there, separated by a thin barrier of wood, a grieving woman and a scared, scarred cat, sharing a silence that wasn't empty anymore. It was companioned. That night, for the first time, when she entered for his evening ointment, he didn't shrink back into the corner. He stayed sitting in the middle of the bed, watching her approach. His eyes were still wide, but the frantic heartbeat beneath her fingers, when she gently applied the medicine, was just a little slower. The small victories began to accumulate, like fragile pearls on a string. The day he didn't hide his face after the ointment, but instead, slowly, deliberately, began to groom the fur around his sore nose, as if trying to fix what she'd must. The soft, rumbling purr that startled them both one afternoon, a rusty engine starting after years of disuse, vibrating deep in his chest as she scratched a spot just so behind one less inflamed ear. It was tentative, fragile, and stopped the moment she paused, but it was there. Proof of life, of comfort, sparking in the quiet. He started venturing out. First, just a paw over the threshold of the bathroom door, testing the air of the hallway. Then a cautious exploration of the living room, sticking close to the walls, his big nose twitching constantly, sampling this new world, the scent of old books, Emma's abandoned coffee mug. He discovered the patch of weak afternoon sun that slanted through the living room window, falling onto a worn rug. One afternoon, Emma looked up from her book, and there he was, curled tightly in that pool of light, a small, orange and white comma. His eyes were closed, his breathing deep and even. The raw patches on his nose, while still visible, looked less angry, less raw. The fur around them was starting, just barely, to show signs of regrowth, tiny, pale fuzz. Watching him sleep, bathed in that frail October sun, something warm and unfamiliar uncurled in Emma's chest. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was tenderness, a fierce, protective ache. This broken creature, trusting her enough to sleep, vulnerable, in her space. In her light, the ointment routine evolved. Less a clinical procedure, more a strange, intimate ritual. He'd still tense, but he'd meet her at the bathroom door now, sometimes even brushing his head tentatively against her leg before the dreaded gloves came out. "All right, Bubble," she'd murmur, using the nickname that had slipped out one day. "Let's get this over with." She'd scoop him gently, feeling the compact weight of him, the surprising density of muscle beneath the soft fur. He'd settle in her lap on the closed toilet lid, a warm, vibrating bundle. She'd talk softly as she worked, telling him about her day, her mother's love for terrible reality TV, anything to distract them both. And sometimes, when the ointment was applied, instead of pulling away, he'd lean, just slightly, into the careful pressure of her gloved finger. A silent acknowledgement, a shared burden. She started noticing things. How he'd watch the birds outside the window with intense, almost scholarly focus, his tail tip giving the faintest twitch. How he'd gently pat her hand with a soft paw, claws carefully sheathed, if she stopped petting him too soon. How he seemed to prefer the quiet hum of the refrigerator, often curling up on the kitchen mat beside it. Then came the night of the first true surprise. Emma was curled on the sofa, trying to lose herself in a movie, but her mind kept drifting back to the empty chair, the silence where her mother's laughter should have been. The familiar gray weight settled over her, heavy and cold. She must have dozed off, or simply zoned out, lost in the hollow ache. She wasn't sure how much time had passed when she felt it. A slight dip in the cushion beside her hip. A warmth. A presence. Slowly, she opened her eyes, afraid to move. Barney wasn't on the floor. He wasn't watching from a distance. He was there, curled into a tight, warm ball, pressed firmly against her side. His big nose was tucked against his chest, his breathing deep and slow in sleep. One soft paw, the pads slightly rough, rested lightly on her thigh. Not demanding, just present, anchoring her. She didn't dare breathe, didn't dare move a muscle. Tears welled again, but this time they weren't born of loneliness. They were born of a sudden, overwhelming sense of being seen. Not fixed, not judged, just accompanied. In the quiet darkness, broken only by the flickering TV screen, Emma felt the ice around her heart crack a little wider, and the warmth, the simple, profound warmth of a small, scarred cat trusting her enough to sleep beside her, began slowly to seep in. Peace, it's a fragile thing. Like the first thin layer of ice on a November puddle, beautiful, holding the reflected sky, but you know it won't last. Not yet. For Emma and Barney, the quiet rhythm they'd found felt precious. Mornings began not with the hollow echo of silence, but with the soft thump of Barney landing lightly beside the bed, his big nose hovering inches from hers, a silent, amber-eyed alarm clock. The twice-daily ointment ritual had transformed. Now, he'd often meet her at the bathroom door, weaving figure eights around her ankles, a low, rusty purr already rumbling in anticipation of the chin scratch that followed the medicine. The raw patches on his noble nose were fading, replaced by healthy pink skin and a soft fuzz of new fur. He looked better, stronger, less like a wounded secret, and more like a cat. Her cat. He'd claimed his spots. The sun puddle on the living room rug, the corner of the sofa where the cushion dipped just right, the kitchen mat near the fridge's comforting hum. He'd watch her cook, head tilted, observing the mysteries of boiling water and chopping vegetables with intense fascination. He'd bat at dust motes dancing in the afternoon light, a silent, graceful hunter of the invisible. And at night, he'd curl against her side on the sofa, or sometimes, tentatively, on the edge of her bed. His warmth, the solid weight of him, The deep, rhythmic purr vibrating through the mattress became Emma's new lullaby. It didn't erase the grief, that deep ache for her mother, but it softened its edges. It filled the silence with something living, something present. She found herself smiling more. Talking to him, really talking, sharing little stories about her day, things she might have told her mother. He'd listen, blinking slowly, or sometimes just sleep, but his presence felt like an acknowledgement, a quiet witness to her slow, painful thawing. But then, the scratching started. Not the idle kneading of blankets, or the post-litter box frenzy. This was different, persistent, focused, almost obsessive. It always happened at night, deep in the quiet hours, when the world outside Emma's apartment was still. She'd be pulled from sleep. Not by a sound, but by a feeling. A low, rhythmic vibration, almost like distant sandpaper. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Fuzz. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It came from the hallway. Specifically, from the door of the small, walk-in linen closet. The one tucked just past the bathroom, the one Emma barely used. At first, she dismissed it. Barney exploring. Finding a new texture he liked. Maybe a loose thread on the carpet. She'd call out softly, "Barney? It's sleepy time, buddy." The scratching would stop. Silence would return. She'd drift off, only to be pulled back minutes later. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound was insistent, purposeful. It felt less like play and more like work. Curiosity and a flicker of unease began to prickle at Emma. One night, she slipped out of bed, moving silently down the dark hallway. Moonlight filtered through the small window at the end, casting long, distorted shadows. Barney was there, sitting upright before the closed closet door. His silhouette was stark against the pale wood. Not scratching at that moment, just staring. Utterly still, focused. His big nose was almost pressed to the crack at the bottom of the door. His tail lay perfectly straight behind him, the very tip giving the faintest, barely perceptible twitch. He didn't turn as she approached, didn't acknowledge her presence. He was locked onto that door, radiating an intensity that felt unnerving. "Barney," she whispered. He didn't flinch, just kept staring. She reached down, gently running a hand along his back. His fur felt slightly bristled, tense. Beneath her touch, the low rumble she felt wasn't his usual contented purr. It was different, deeper, almost a growl, but not hostile. More like concentration, a vibration of pure, focused intent. He finally blinked, slowly, deliberately, but his gaze snapped back to the door crack instantly. What was in there? Dusty towels? Extra blankets? Old photo albums she hadn't had the heart to open since her mother died? Why was this closet, this mundane space, holding him captive? The behavior didn't stop. Night after night, the ritual resumed. Emma tried everything. She sprayed citrus scent, supposedly a cat deterrent, near the door. She placed a scratching post enticingly nearby. She even opened the closet door during the day, letting Barney investigate its unremarkable contents, neatly stacked linens, a vacuum cleaner, a few boxes labeled "Mom's stuff" in her own hesitant handwriting. He'd wandered and sniffed disinterestedly at a box, batted at a dangling towel, and walked out, utterly unimpressed. Yet, come nightfall, the magnetic pull returned. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Stare. That low, focused vibration. It started to seep into Emma's days. She'd find herself pausing by the closet, looking at the ordinary wooden door, feeling a strange prickle on her skin. Was it just Barney being weird? Cats were weird. Or was it something else? The untouched boxes labeled "Mom Stuff" seemed to hum with a sudden, quiet significance. Grief, she realized, wasn't a linear path. It was a landscape full of hidden pockets, things you avoided, doors you kept firmly shut. Had she shut something away in there, something her mother left behind, that Barney somehow sensed? The thought felt ridiculous, superstitious, yet it clung, driven by a growing unease. Emma pulled out the folder the shelter had given her with Barney's scant paperwork. She'd glanced at it once, focused only on his medical needs. Now, she looked closer. His estimated age, 3 years. His intake date, just a few weeks before she'd adopted him. Found as a stray, they said, wandering near the old industrial park on the south side of town. Malnourished. Infected. Alone. She stared at the address scribbled for the finder who'd brought him in. It wasn't an address she recognized, but the street name, Cedar Lane, rang a faint, distant bell. But she closed her eyes, trying to place it. Nothing concrete surfaced, just a vague feeling, like a half-remembered dream. And Cedar Lane, it wasn't anywhere near the industrial park. Why would the person who found him give an address miles away? A discrepancy. Small, maybe meaningless, but it added another layer to the mystery scratching at her door, literally and figuratively. The simple narrative of the stray cat suddenly felt less solid. The tension escalated. Barney's nighttime vigils grew longer, more intense. Sometimes, he'd let out a small, frustrated chirp at the door. Other times, he'd simply sit for hours, motionless, a sentinel guarding or waiting for something Emma couldn't see. She started avoiding the hallway at night. The sound, that focused, almost desperate scratching, scraped at her nerves. It echoed the scratching inside her own chest, the unresolved ache of her mother's loss, the questions left unanswered. She'd lie awake, listening, feeling the weight of Barney's silent vigil down the hall and the heavier weight of the boxes in the closet she'd been too afraid to open. What was he trying to tell her? What was hidden behind that ordinary door, beyond the towels and the vacuum, buried in her mother's things? The fear wasn't of something supernatural, but of something painfully real. A memory? A truth? Something her grief had walled away, that this strange, big-nosed cat, with his uncanny focus, was determined to unearth. Then came the night it broke. Emma was already on edge. A difficult day at work lay heavy on her, layered over the constant, low thrum of missing her mother. The scratching started earlier than usual, sharper, more frantic. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It wasn't the usual rhythmic sandpaper sound. It was claws digging, tearing. She bolted upright in bed, heart pounding. "Barney! Stop!" Her voice cracked in the darkness. Silence. Thick, heavy, expectant. She flicked on her bedside lamp, the sudden light harsh. Taking a shaky breath, she got up, padding down the hallway. He wasn't at the door. The closet door stood closed, but at its base, illuminated in the weak spill of light from her room, were fresh, deep gouges in the wood. Pale splinters stood out against the dark stain. Barney sat a few feet away, in the middle of the hallway. Not cowering, not guilty, just watching her. His amber eyes reflected the light, unblinking. His chest moved rapidly. He'd done this. He'd damaged something. But the look in his eyes, it wasn't defiance. It was urgency. A silent plea. "Open it." Emma stood frozen, staring at the gashes in the wood, then at Barney, then back at the door. The ordinary closet door now felt like a threshold. On one side, the fragile piece they'd built, the tentative healing. On the other, something hidden, something Barney was desperately trying to reach, something tied to the discrepancy in his paperwork, and perhaps to the untouched boxes of her mother's life. The air hummed with tension. The silence wasn't empty now, it was charged. Heavy with the weight of an unanswered question, and the terrifying possibility of an answer she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The scratching had stopped, but the real work, the excavation of something buried deep, felt like it had only just begun. Her hand, almost of its own volition, slowly reached for the closet doorknob. Emma's hand hovered over the cool brass doorknob. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. The gouges Barney had left, stark and pale against the dark wood, felt like accusations. Or pleas. The air vibrated with the aftermath of his frantic energy and the heavy weight of her own fear. Behind this ordinary door lay the untouched remnants of her mother's life, packed hastily in grief's numb aftermath. And somehow, this cat, this stray with the noble nose, seemed tethered to it, to her. The discrepancy in the shelter paperwork. Cedar Lane. It echoed like a half-remembered chord. Her mother, she'd volunteered. For years. Delivering meals. Driving seniors to appointments. Cedar Lane. Cedar Lane. It was a senior living complex. On the other side of town. Miles from the industrial park where Barney was supposedly found. The connection felt fragile, gossamer thin, yet undeniable. Barney stared at her, unblinking. His amber eyes held no malice, only that intense, unwavering focus. Open it. With a breath that shuddered in her chest, Emma turned the knob. The door swung inward with a soft sigh, releasing a wave of stale air, dust motes dancing in the weak light from the hallway. The familiar scent of clean linen, and beneath it, the faint, heartbreaking trace of her mother's lavender sachets. The vacuum cleaner stood sentinel. Neat stacks of towels and sheets filled the shelves. And on the floor, pushed against the back wall, were 3 cardboard boxes. Sealed with packing tape, labeled in her own hesitant handwriting, written through a blur of tears 11 months ago. Mom's sweaters. Mom's books. Mom's papers and photos. Barney didn't rush in. He stayed in the hallway, sitting perfectly still, watching her. His tail lay flat now, the tip twitching minutely. Emma stepped inside. The small space felt suddenly immense, charged with memory. She knelt, her knees protesting against the cool linoleum. Her gaze fixed on the box labeled papers and photos. It felt heavier than the others. Laden. She hadn't been able to face it. The physical evidence of a life concluded. Bank statements. Birthday cards. Loose photographs. The mundane debris of existence, now imbued with unbearable significance. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the packing tape sealing the flaps. The tearing sound was obscenely loud in the quiet. She pulled back the flaps, releasing another puff of dust and lavender. Inside a jumble. Folders. Envelopes. A small wooden trinket box she remembered from her mother's dresser. And, nestled haphazardly near the top, a small, cheaply printed flyer. Bright yellow paper. Slightly crumpled. Emma picked it up. Her breath caught. It was a lost cat poster. The image was blurry, photocopied, but unmistakable. A compact orange and white cat, looking thinner, more ragged, but with a nose that dominated his face. A nose she knew intimately. Barney, the flyer proclaimed in bold, uneven letters. missing from Cedar Lane Gardens Senior Living. Very friendly. Needs medication. Reward. And below, a contact number, now disconnected, and a name that punched the air from Emma's lungs, Marianne Davies. Her mother's name, her mother's volunteer haunt. The world tilted. Emma slumped back against the doorframe, the flyer clutched in her shaking hand. Barney, her Barney bubble, hadn't been a stray wandering the industrial park. He'd been lost. Lost from Cedar Lane. Lost from her mother. The pieces crashed together, forming a picture so bittersweet it stole her breath. Her mother, volunteering, befriending this unique, big-nosed cat who needed medication. Maybe feeding him, petting him, offering comfort in her quiet way. And then he'd vanished. Around the time, Emma realized with a fresh wave of nausea, around the time her mother's own health had taken its final, devastating turn. Had he slipped out unnoticed in the chaos? Had her mother, in her fading strength, been heartbroken over the loss of this small companion? Emma had been so consumed by her mother's illness, the hospital vigils, the crushing finality, she'd barely registered the outside world. She'd certainly never heard about a missing cat named Barney. A choked sob escaped her. Then another. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was guilt. A profound, aching guilt. Her mother alone in her final weeks, grieving the loss of this small, vulnerable creature she'd cared for, and Emma, wrapped in her own pain, hadn't known. Hadn't been able to help. She'd failed her mother in this one, small, tender thing. The tears came hot and fast, blurring the bright yellow flyer in her hands. She curled in on herself, right there on the dusty closet floor, the waves of sorrow, regret, and a strange, piercing loneliness washing over her anew. She was back in that vast, gray sea, utterly adrift. Though a soft pressure against her side. A gentle nudge against her trembling arm. Emma opened her eyes, blurred with tears. Barney was there. He hadn't rushed in earlier, but he'd come to her now. He pressed his body firmly, insistently against her curled form. His big nose, the nose her mother had surely petted, nudged her elbow again. Not demanding attention, but giving it, offering his solid presence. His anchor. He looked up at her, those deep amber eyes, no longer intense with focus, but soft. Understanding. Unbearably kind. He made a sound, a low, questioning meow. Then slowly, deliberately, lowered his head and nudged the yellow flyer still clutched in her hand. As if to say, "See? This is me. And her. We were connected. She loved me too." The gesture shattered her. Emma dropped the flyer and reached for him, burying her face in the soft fur of his neck, the fur that was finally growing back healthy over the healed patches. She wept openly, then great, heaving sobs that shook them both. She wept for her mother's loneliness. She wept for Barney's lost weeks, scared, sick, searching. She wept for her own blindness. And she wept for the impossible, fragile thread that had somehow woven them all together across loss and time. Barney didn't squirm, didn't pull away. He leaned into her, his body a warm, vibrating pillar against her storm. He began to purr. Not the tentative rumble of early days, but a deep, resonant, unwavering engine of sound. A primal vibration of comfort flowing from his small chest into her trembling body. It filled the dusty closet, a counterpoint to her tears, a tangible pulse of life and connection. He was here. Her mother's final, silent gift delivered by fate, or perhaps by a persistent, big-nosed cat who knew where he belonged. Slowly, the storm subsided. The sobs turned to hiccups, then to shuddering breaths. Emma lifted her head, her face wet, her eyes swollen, but something inside her, something clenched tight for 11 months, had finally broken. Not shattered into irreparable pieces, but cracked open. Cleansed. She looked down at Barney. He blinked up at her, slowly, deliberately. A cat kiss. Then he did something extraordinary. He gently, oh so gently, placed one soft paw, claws meticulously sheathed, right over her heart, holding it, as if sealing the crack he'd helped create. His purr deepened, a steady, grounding thrum against her palm where she cradled him. In that dusty closet, surrounded by the ghost of lavender and the tangible warmth of this miraculous cat. Emma Davies didn't just remember her mother. She felt her kindness, her quiet love for lost creatures, her enduring presence, woven into the very fabric of the cat purring on her lap. Barney wasn't just a rescue. He was a bridge. A living, breathing testament to her mother's unseen acts of love, returning home when both he and Emma needed it most. The mystery was solved. The scratching, his intense focus, it hadn't been about the closet itself. It had been about what was hidden inside it. The proof, the connection, the final, unspoken message from a mother to her daughter, delivered on 4 silent paws. Emma sat there for a long time, Barney a warm, purring weight in her arms. The yellow flyer lay beside them, no longer a source of guilt, but a fragile, precious artifact. A love letter in the form of a lost cat poster. The gray sea inside her hadn't vanished, but it felt navigable now, because she wasn't alone in the boat anymore. She had a lighthouse with a very distinctive nose and a purr that could mend the most fractured soul. She gently stroked the bridge of that nose, the skin now smooth and healthy beneath her fingertips. "You found your way back, Bubble," she whispered, her voice raw but clear. "You found your way back to her, through me." And in finding her, he'd found a piece of Emma she thought was lost forever. The light, filtering weakly from the hallway, seemed warmer now, brighter, illuminating not just dust motes, but the quiet miracle curled in her arms. The dust motes still danced in the weak morning light filtering through Emma's kitchen window. The worn sofa still held its familiar dip. The dripping taps still needed fixing. Yet, everything had shifted. It was a subtle revolution, not of furniture or walls, but of air, of light, of the very molecules inside Emma's chest. Kneeling on the cool linoleum of the hallway closet, clutching Barney Bubble, the yellow flyer a silent witness beside them, had been a detonation. Not of destruction, but of release. 11 months of tightly coiled grief, guilt, and loneliness had finally found its exit wound, washed away by a torrent of tears and the unwavering purr vibrating against her heart. She felt hollowed out, but not empty, cleansed, strangely, softly open. Barney seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere, or perhaps he simply felt the shift in Emma herself. The frantic, obsessive scratching at the closet door ceased completely. That intense, unnerving focus dissolved. It was as if the mission, the desperate need to communicate the connection, had been accomplished. He didn't avoid the closet. He'd sometimes wander in, sniff at the now open box containing his lost poster, maybe bat gently at a dangling towel, but the frantic energy was gone, replaced by peace, a deep, feline satisfaction. His world, once confined by fear and infection, then expanded cautiously into Emma's apartment, now felt settled. Secure. Their routines remained, but infused with a new layer of tenderness. The twice-daily ointment application was no longer a medical chore, it was a sacrament, a quiet moment of connection. Emma would sit cross-legged on the living room floor. Barney would amble over, often purring before she even picked up the tube. He'd settle into her lap, a warm, heavy weight, tipping his head back trustingly, presenting his noble nose. The skin was smooth now, the fur fully regrown, a soft, pale orange fuzz over the bridge. The only remnants were faint, pale lines, like tiny maps of his journey. She'd apply the ointment, not because it was strictly needed anymore, but because it was their ritual. A tactile affirmation of care, of survival. He'd close his eyes, the rumble in his chest deepening, sometimes reaching up with a soft paw to gently pat her wrist, claws meticulously sheathed. "Thank you. I trust you," she'd whisper. "Good boy, Bubble," and the words no longer felt hollow. They felt like warm stones sinking into a calm pond. He claimed new territory, not just physical spaces, but emotional ones. He started sleeping, truly sleeping, on Emma's bed. Not just on the edge, but curled right against her side, or sometimes, daringly, stretched out on his back, his big nose pointed towards the ceiling, soft belly exposed in ultimate feline trust. His purr became the soundtrack to her nights, a deep, resonant lullaby that soothed the lingering edges of sadness. Mornings, instead of hovering, he'd often wake her with a gentle headbutt against her cheek, his nose cold, his purr already rumbling. "Good morning. I'm here." She'd open her eyes, see that distinctive profile silhouetted against the dawn light, and feel a warmth bloom in her chest, chasing away the residual chill of grief. It wasn't happiness as she once knew it, it was something quieter, deeper. A profound gratitude, a sense of being anchored. Emma found herself doing things she hadn't done in a year. Small things, meaningful things. She opened the curtains wider, letting more of the weak November sun flood the apartment. She finally fixed the dripping tap, the rhythmic plink replaced by blessed silence. And one rainy afternoon, she pulled out the other boxes from the closet. Not with dread, but with a quiet curiosity, a sense of readiness. She unfolded her mother's sweaters, holding them to her face, inhaling the fading scent of lavender and her. It brought tears, but they were softer now, tinged with sweetness. She flipped through photo albums, smiling at pictures of her younger self, her mother's bright eyes, instead of turning the pages quickly to avoid the pain. Barney was often nearby, sometimes batting playfully at a loose thread on a sweater, sometimes simply sitting beside her, a warm, silent presence as she navigated the memories. He seemed content, as if witnessing the integration, the weaving of past and present. She framed the yellow lost cat flyer, not hidden away, but placed on her small bookshelf, beside a picture of her mother smiling. A testament, a bridge. Barney would sometimes sit before it, staring at the blurry image of his younger, thinner self, then back at Emma. A slow blink. That was me. And her. And now Emma would reach down, stroke the now sleek fur along his back, feeling the solid reality of him. "We found each other, didn't we, Bubble?" she'd murmur. He'd lean into her touch, purring. The connection to her mother, once a source of searing pain, now felt like a warm current, flowing through Barney into her. He wasn't a replacement, he was a continuation. A living embodiment of her mother's quiet kindness, returned. Barney's personality, no longer shadowed by fear or discomfort, blossomed fully. He revealed a playful streak, chasing dust motes with acrobatic leaps, batting crumpled paper balls across the floor with intense concentration, his big nose twitching comically. He developed a fascination with water, sitting beside the sink, watching the droplets fall with rapt attention, sometimes daring to pat at the stream with a tentative paw. He'd bring her gifts, usually his favorite toy mouse, deposited solemnly on her lap while she read. And he talked. Not incessantly, but with a repertoire of chirps, trills, and soft, questioning meows, often directed specifically at Emma, as if expecting an answer. She'd answer, "Of course." Their conversations, nonsensical to anyone else, became another thread in their shared tapestry. One evening, Emma sat at her small kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling beside her laptop. The idea had been forming, slowly, like the fuzz regrowing on Barney's nose. A tiny spark ignited by gratitude, by the sheer improbability of their story. She opened a new social media account. Not for herself. For him. At Barney Bubblenose. She uploaded a single photo. Not a glamour shot, but a candid moment. Barney asleep on the sun-drenched rug, stretched out, belly exposed, his big nose prominent, peaceful. The healed skin around it was barely visible, just a testament to resilience. She typed a simple caption, her fingers hovering over the keys. "This is Barney. He found his way home. He saved me more than I saved him. Every nose tells a story. His is just bigger." She paused, took a breath, feeling strangely vulnerable, then clicked post. It wasn't an explosion. It was a gentle ripple. A few likes from friends. A comment, "What a unique face. So handsome." Another, "That nose." Smiling face with heart eyes. Emma smiled, a private, warm feeling spreading through her. It felt good to share this light, this quiet miracle. She started posting more. Short snippets. Barney batting at a sunbeam. Barney tilting his head curiously at the dripping tap. Barney curled beside her on the sofa, his purr almost audible through the photo. Always focusing on his expressive face, his calm eyes, his defining feature. She shared tiny pieces of their story, carefully, tenderly. His rescue, his recovery, his presence. Not the deep grief or the closet revelation, just the simple, profound comfort of him. The quiet joy of being seen, of being anchored. The response grew, slowly, steadily. People drawn to his unique look, kiss, but more to the palpable sense of peace, of healing radiating from the images. Comments poured in. "He looks so wise. That face just makes my heart happy. You can see the love. Thank you for sharing him." Emma watched it unfold, not with ambition, but with a sense of quiet wonder. This cat, her mother's lost friend, her own unlikely savior, was resonating. His big nose, once a source of discomfort, a mark of his ordeal, had become his signature. A beacon of quiet resilience. People started sharing stories of their own rescues, their own losses, their own journeys towards finding light. The @Barney Bubblenose account became, unexpectedly, a tiny corner of gentle connection. A digital sun puddle, much like the one Barney loved on the rug. Emma would sit with him in the evenings, reading the comments aloud. He'd blink slowly, perhaps sensing the warmth flowing towards him through the screen. He didn't understand the internet, but he understood the quiet energy in Emma's voice, the soft smile on her face as she typed replies. It was another layer, another unexpected gift. Life wasn't perfect. The ache for her mother still surfaced, sometimes triggered by a scent, a song, a time of day. But it no longer consumed her. It was a part of her landscape now, acknowledged, held, but not allowed to drown the light. Barney was her compass in those moments. A warm weight on her lap, a cold nose nuzzling her hand, a deep, grounding purr. He reminded her constantly that joy wasn't the absence of pain, but the presence of connection. That healing wasn't forgetting, but weaving the loss into the fabric of a life still being lived. He'd look at her with those deep amber eyes, and she'd see reflected back, not just her own sadness sometimes, but her own strength. Her capacity for love, still vast, still capable of expanding to encompass this strange, big-nosed creature, and through him, her mother's enduring spirit. One crisp December afternoon, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the framed yellow flyer on the bookshelf and the sleeping cat on the rug below it. Emma stood watching them, a mug of tea warming her hands. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, filled not with echoes of absence, but with the soft sounds of presence. Barney's rhythmic breathing, the distant chirp of a sparrow outside, the gentle ticking of the clock her mother had loved. She looked at Barney, his noble nose, his utterly relaxed form, and then at her mother's smiling picture beside the flyer. The circle, once shattered, felt gently closed. Not forgotten, but integrated. Barney Bubble, the lost cat, the rescued soul, the quiet healer, had become more than just her companion. He was the bridge between her past and her present, the living proof that love, in its quietest, most unexpected forms, endures. And sometimes, it comes home, wearing fur, and sporting a very, very distinctive nose. The gray sea hadn't vanished, but Emma had learned to sail it, with a very unique lighthouse guiding her way. The journey wasn't over, but the hardest storms, she knew now, were behind them. They were anchored, together. The framed yellow flyer on the bookshelf wasn't just a memento. It was a compass, a quiet, persistent reminder of the invisible threads that bind lives together, across distance, across loss, across the veil between presence and memory. As the gentle rhythm of life with Barney deepened, as the @BarneyBubbleNose account grew, becoming a soft hum of shared stories and quiet appreciation in Emma's online world, something else began to stir. Not restlessness, but a quiet prompting. A feeling that their story, Barney's improbable journey home, wasn't quite finished giving its gifts. Emma found herself drawn back to the remaining boxes of her mother's things. Not with the heavy dread of before, but with a curious tenderness. A desire to know Marianne Davies, not just as her mother, but as the woman who had befriended a lost cat with a big nose. She sorted through sweaters again, folding them with care, imagining her mother choosing the soft blues and grays. She lingered over the books, noting the dog-eared pages, the faint pencil marks in the margins, glimpses into her mother's quiet mind. But it was the last box, the one holding the smaller, more personal items, that held the next whisper. Buried beneath bundles of old letters and birthday cards, wrapped in tissue paper gone brittle with age, Emma found a project, half finished. A tangle of soft, dove-gray yarn, still attached to knitting needles. And pinned to it, a simple, handwritten note in her mother's familiar looping script, for Cedar Lane donation drive. Scarves for winter. Emma's breath caught. She remembered her mother mentioning this years ago. Knitting simple scarves for the seniors at Cedar Lane Gardens during the colder months. A small act of warmth. Literally and figuratively. She stopped. Emma realized, around the time her own health began its decline. The half-finished scarf, the yarn so soft, felt like a suspended breath. A kindness interrupted. Barney, ever attuned to shifts in Emma's energy, padded over. He sniffed at the bundle of gray yarn, his big nose twitching furiously. He didn't bat at it playfully. He pressed his face into the softness, inhaled deeply, lingeringly. A low, thoughtful rumble started in his chest, different from his contented purr. It was softer, almost reminiscent. He looked up at Emma, then back at the yarn, nudging it gently with his nose. This smell, this texture. Emma watched him, a strange understanding dawning. The scent of the yarn, the lavender sachets her mother always tucked into her knitting bag, the very essence of her, was woven into this unfinished project. Barney wasn't just curious. He was recognizing something. A scent memory, a tactile echo of the woman who had cared for him, petted him, perhaps even held this very yarn in her lap as he curled beside her at Cedar Lane. Every time someone subscribes, it's like another little light turns on in this peaceful corner of YouTube. If this story touched you tonight, please stay with me. I'd love to share more soft, sleepy cat tales with you. The sight of the half-finished scarf, and Barney's profound reaction to it, sparked something in Emma. A quiet resolve. It wasn't about finishing her mother's charity work out of obligation. It was about continuing a gesture of warmth, a tangible connection, sparked by the cat who had been the recipient of that warmth. She gathered the yarn, the needles, the note. She bought more soft gray wool. And one evening, curled on the sofa with Barney purring like a motorboat beside her, Emma Davies, who hadn't knitted since childhood, clumsily picked up the needles. Her first rows were uneven, full of dropped stitches. She laughed softly at her own clumsiness, sharing her frustrations with Barney. He watched, blinking slowly, as if offering silent encouragement, occasionally reaching out a paw to gently pat the growing fabric. The rhythmic click-click of the needles joined the sound of his purr, a new, comforting soundtrack to their evenings. Weeks passed. The scarf grew, slowly, steadily, becoming less clumsy, more even. Emma found a profound peace in the repetitive motion, the feel of the soft wool sliding through her fingers. It was a meditation, a quiet conversation with her mother across time and space. She thought of her, sitting in her favorite armchair, perhaps with a thin, orange and white cat curled at her feet, her own needles clicking softly. She imagined the seniors at Cedar Lane, receiving these scarves, a small shield against the winter chill, a whisper of kindness from a woman they might remember, delivered by her daughter, inspired by the cat she'd loved. Barney remained her constant companion during these knitting sessions. He'd often curl up right on the ball of yarn, a warm, furry paperweight, or drape himself across her lap, his purr vibrating through the wool and into her hands. His big nose would sometimes nudge the growing scarf, as if bestowing a silent blessing. Then came the day Emma finished the last stitch. She held up the long, soft dove-gray scarf. It was simple, imperfect, but imbued with love and memory and the quiet persistence of a rescued cat. She looked at Barney, sleeping peacefully on the rug, bathed in a patch of winter sun. The thought occurred to her, "Handed sweet." Carefully, gently, laid the finished scarf over him like a tiny blanket. He stirred, blinked open his amber eyes, looked up at her, then snuggled deeper into the soft wool, a deep, rumbling sigh escaping him. Emma snapped a picture. Not for the account, just for her. Barney Bubble, her mother's lost friend, her own unlikely savior, now wrapped in the warmth her mother had intended for others. The circle felt impossibly, tenderly complete. She didn't plan to share the story of the scarf immediately, but the @BarneyBubbleNose community had become a space of gentle sharing. People posted pictures of their own pets curled up in cozy spots, shared stories of small acts of kindness inspired by their animals, offered quiet support during hard times. One evening, feeling a surge of gratitude for this unexpected digital haven, Emma posted the picture of Barney wrapped in the gray scarf. She kept the caption simple, honest. Finished Mum's last project. Dove gray for Cedar Lane. Bubble seems to approve. Warmth, it always finds its way home. She included the hashtag continuing kindness. The response wasn't just likes and hearts. It was a wave. Comments poured in, deeper, more personal than before. This made me tear up, in the best way. My grandma knitted for her nursing home too. This hit my heart. Barney's face peeking out, pure peace. You're honoring her in the most beautiful way. The scarf looks so soft, just like the love. Hashtag continuing kindness indeed. Thank you for this. People began sharing their own stories of continuing a loved one's traditions, big or small. Baking a grandparent's recipe. Volunteering where a parent once did. Planting flowers a sibling loved. Barney, blissfully unaware of his role as a global comfort icon, simply continued to embody the peace he'd helped Emma find. His big nose, now famous, was just part of him. His true gift was his presence, his quiet insistence on connection, his ability to inspire acts of tenderness that rippled far beyond Emma's living room. The final gift, the deepest reveal, came subtly. It wasn't in a box. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was in Emma's own reflection. As she prepared the box of scarves for donation to Cedar Lane, including the one Barney had blessed, she realized something profound. The crushing loneliness, the feeling of being a smudge on the glass, was gone. Not forgotten, but transformed. In its place was a quiet sense of purpose, woven from threads of grief, love, resilience, and the unwavering companionship of a cat with a remarkable nose. Barney hadn't just helped her heal. He hadn't just connected her to her mother's memory. He'd shown her that her own capacity for kindness, for creating warmth, was still vibrant, still needed. He'd mirrored back to her not just her pain, but her strength, her creativity, her ability to love deeply even through loss. He'd helped her rediscover herself. On a crisp, bright January morning, Emma walked into Cedar Lane Gardens Senior Living for the first time. The lobby was warm, bustling with quiet activity. She carried the box of soft, gray scarves. Barney, safely at home in his sun puddle, was with her in spirit. As she handed the box to the kindly activities coordinator, explaining they were from Marianne Davies' daughter, continuing her mother's project, she felt a wave of emotion. Not sadness, but a profound connection. A fullness. The coordinator's eyes softened with recognition. Marianne, oh, she was a light. Always so thoughtful. And she adored that little orange cat that used to visit. Barney, wasn't it? Such a character with that nose. Emma smiled, tears prickling, but they were tears of sweet recognition. Of a story confirmed. Of love remembered. Yes, Emma said, her voice thick but clear. Barney, he's home now. And he sends his warmth too. She gently touched the scarf on top, the one Barney had snuggled into. It felt infused with more than wool. With memory. With resilience. With the quiet, purring persistence of a second chance. As she left Cedar Lane, stepping back into the winter sunlight, Emma Davies didn't feel like she was leaving her mother behind. She felt like she was carrying her forward, wrapped in dove-gray wool, guided by the memory of a distinctive nose, and the enduring warmth of a kindness continued. The gift Barney gave wasn't just a resolved mystery or viral fame. It was the rediscovery of Emma's own heart, beating strong, capable of creating warmth, and finally, feeling truly seen. Life after the breaking isn't about becoming someone new. It's about becoming more deeply, tenderly, who you always were. Just seen. Understood in ways you couldn't manage alone. For Emma Davies, the gray sea hadn't drained away, but it had calmed. Become navigable. Familiar, even comforting in its vastness. Because she was no longer a fragile skiff tossed on its surface. She was a vessel, sturdy, knowing the currents, guided by a very unique, very persistent lighthouse. Barney Bubble, curled in his perpetual sun puddle on the living room rug, wasn't just a cat. He was a living testament, a breathing monument to the quiet miracles woven from loss, chance, and the stubborn persistence of love. Mornings in the apartment weren't about confronting silence anymore. They were about the soft thump beside the bed, the cold, insistent nudge of a large nose against her cheek, the deep, rumbling purr that started the moment her eyes fluttered open. "Good morning. We're here. Together." Emma would reach out, stroke the bridge of that nose, now smooth and strong, tracing the faint, pale lines that were the only physical remnants of his ordeal. They weren't scars, they were medals, testaments to resilience. His amber eyes, blinking slowly in the dawn light, held a depth of knowing that still took her breath away. He didn't erase the memory of her mother's smile, he amplified it. He was the living echo of Marianne Davies' kindness, returned, amplified, and purring. The @Barney Bubble Nose account flourished, a quiet phenomenon. It wasn't about viral fame, though his noble profile, captured in moments of sun-drenched serenity, playful curiosity, or profound napping, resonated globally. It was about the feeling it transmitted, the palpable sense of peace, the slow, steady rhythm of healing, the profound beauty of an imperfect, rescued creature embodying pure contentment. People didn't just see a cat with a big nose. They saw a reflection. Their own struggles, their own losses, their own quiet hopes for connection. Comments poured in, raw and real. "Seeing Barney's calm face is my anxiety medicine. He reminds me it's okay to be a little broken and still find the sun. Lost my dad last year. Barney's purr, through the screen, it helps. You saved each other. Proof we all need saving sometimes." Emma managed it with the same quiet tenderness she applied Barney's ointment. Sharing snippets, not performative, but intimate. His fascination with a dripping tap. His solemn presentation of a toy mouse. The way he'd press his forehead against hers, a silent feline benediction. She shared the #continuing kindness stories that poured in from followers, tales of small, loving gestures inspired by Barney's journey. The account became a digital hearth, a place to gather, share warmth, and remember the quiet power of simply being present. Barney, blissfully unaware of his global reach, remained utterly grounded. His world was the sun puddle, the sound of the fridge, the scent of Emma's hands, the satisfying texture of a well-scratched post. His profound impact wasn't in his awareness, but in his pure, uncomplicated being. This messy, beautiful, unexpected journey, it whispers truths that resonate far beyond a small apartment and a distinctive cat. It speaks of how grief, that vast, isolating ocean, isn't something we simply cross. We learn to sail it. We build our boat from the wreckage, plank by painful plank, and we discover lighthouses we never knew existed. Sometimes, they come with fur and a purr that vibrates deep into your bones. It speaks of second chances, not grand, sweeping gestures, but the quiet miracle of a lost creature finding its way home, and in doing so, showing a lost soul the way back to her own heart. Barney wasn't Emma's replacement family. He was her unexpected, fiercely loyal, utterly chosen family. Proof that family isn't always blood. It's the being who sees your cracks, presses against them, and helps hold you together with the simple, solid weight of their presence. It speaks of trust, the most fragile and powerful thing we build, earned not in grand declarations, but in the daily rituals. The careful application of ointment on raw skin, the shared silence across a closed door, the tentative paw placed on a grieving heart, the leap of faith that brings a broken creature home, and the deeper leap of faith that allows yourself to be truly seen, flaws and fractures and all, by another living soul. Barney taught Emma that trust isn't the absence of fear, it's the courage to lean into the touch, even when you remember the sting. It's purring, even when your nose still hurts. It doesn't die. Marianne Davies' love for a vulnerable cat, a small act of kindness in a senior living complex, didn't vanish when Barney got lost, or when she took her last breath. It persisted. It traveled. It transformed. It found its way back, through alleyways and shelters, through fear and infection, landing softly in the lap of her grieving daughter. It bloomed again, not as a ghost, but as a warm, purring, big-nosed reality. Emma learned, isn't a finite resource diminished by loss. It's an energy, a current, that flows, changes form, finds new vessels, but never ever truly disappears. Barney was the conduit, the living proof that love outlasts the breath, outlasts the body, and finds astonishing ways to come home. One evening, deep in the hush of a late winter night, the world outside frosted and still, Emma sat on the floor beside Barney's sun puddle rug. He wasn't sleeping. He was awake, alert, watching her with that unnerving, ancient calm in his amber eyes. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting long, soft shadows. The apartment was quiet, but not empty. Filled with the quiet hum of the fridge, the soft rhythm of Barney's breathing, the lingering scent of lavender from her mother's remaining sachet in the now-organized closet, and the profound, settled peace of a story finding its natural resting place. Emma looked at Barney, really looked, at the noble curve of his nose, catching the faint light, at the healed skin, the testament, at the deep pools of his eyes, reflecting back not just her own image, but a quiet strength she hadn't recognized in herself before he arrived. She didn't speak. Words felt too small, too clumsy, for the immensity of what flowed between them in the quiet. Instead, he slowly, gently reached out. Not to stroke him, but to place her hand, palm open, on the rug beside him. An offering, an acknowledgement. Barney watched her hand for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful, profound. Then, with infinite slowness, infinite care, he lifted his own front paw. Not to bat or play. He extended it, deliberate, graceful, and placed it, soft pad down, directly onto the center of her open palm. Claws meticulously sheathed. The connection was electric, solid. A silent vow. I see you. I'm here. We are anchored. It wasn't just his paw on her hand. It felt like her mother's hand, gentle and reassuring, laid over hers. Like all the love that had ever flowed towards her, converging in this one, purring point of light. Tears welled, silent, sweet, not of grief, but of overwhelming, boundless gratitude. For the journey, for the scars, for the love that found its way home, wearing fur and a nose that told a story bigger than anyone could have imagined. Barney held her gaze, his paw a warm, steady weight on her palm, and began to purr. Not the tentative rumble of their early days. Not even the deep contentment of their settled life. This was a purr of profound, unshakable knowing. A vibration that seemed to emanate from the very center of the universe, flowing through his small, sturdy body, through his paw, into her hand, her arm, her chest, filling every hollow space with warmth, light, and an unassailable sense of belonging. It was the sound of a circle impossibly, perfectly closing. The lost found, the broken told, the invisible seen, the love enduring, the final gift Barney Bubble gave, the one that lingers long after the story is told, isn't fame or even the profound healing he sparked. It's the quiet, earth-shattering revelation that miracles aren't always grand explosions of light. Sometimes, they arrive softly on silent paws, bearing the scars of the world and wearing a nose impossible to ignore. They land in shelters, in grief-stricken apartments, in the quiet corners of the internet, whispering a simple, powerful truth. Even in the deepest winter, warmth finds a way. Love finds a way. Home finds a way. It just might look a little different than you expected. It might have her amber eyes and a nose, blessed, wonderful speak. You stayed till the end. Thank you. If it felt like a soft hug or a warm purr in your heart, subscribing lets me bring you more moments like this.